Sarah was known for her bright smile and the way she always helped Mrs. Gable carry her groceries. She loved playing hopscotch in the park, reading stories about brave knights, and drawing pictures of her fluffy white cat, Snowball. Everyone in town knew Sarah, she was that friendly. One sunny afternoon, after school, Sarah didn't come home. Her mom, noticing the time, started to worry. Sarah was always home by 5, ready for dinner. When 6 o'clock arrived, and Sarah still hadn't appeared, Mom called Dad. He rushed home from work, his face etched with concern. They called Sarah's friends, her teacher, even Mrs. Gable, but no one had seen her since school let out. A heavy feeling settled over the house, a feeling of something terribly wrong. The next morning, the family reported Sarah missing. It felt like a bad dream. The police arrived, their faces serious. They asked lots of questions. What was Sarah wearing? Did she have any enemies? Had she mentioned going anywhere special? Sarah's mom and dad could only shake their heads, tears welling in their eyes. Sarah was a happy child. She didn't have enemies. She loved routine. This was completely out of character. Her younger brother, Timmy, clutched his teddy bear, his eyes wide with fear. He kept asking, "Where's Sarah? When is she coming home?" His parents didn't have an answer, and that made the fear even worse. The police promised to do everything they could to find her. They started by searching the park, the school, and all the streets around Sarah's house. They put up posters with Sarah's picture, her smiling face a beacon of hope against a growing wave of despair. The whole town felt the worry. Everyone hoped for Sarah's safe return. The local news reported on Sarah's disappearance, showing her picture on TV. People from neighboring towns called in, offering help and support. But days turned into a week, and a week into 2, with no sign of Sarah. The police worked tirelessly, but the leads ran cold. The hope that had initially burned bright began to flicker, threatened by the darkness of the unknown. Sarah's parents tried to stay strong, but the fear was a constant companion, whispering doubts and anxieties in their ears. They missed her laughter, her stories, the warmth of her hugs. Snowball, Sarah's cat, wandered around the house, meowing sadly, as if searching for his missing friend. The whole house felt empty without Sarah's presence. The police investigation kicked into high gear. Officers fanned out across the town, questioning neighbors, shopkeepers, and anyone who might have seen Sarah. They showed her picture everywhere, hoping someone would recognize her or remember seeing her on the day she vanished. Detectives searched the nearby woods, calling out Sarah's name, their voices echoing through the trees. A police helicopter buzzed overhead, scanning the area from above. They checked Sarah's computer and phone records, looking for any clues about where she might have gone or who she might have been talking to. They found nothing suspicious. Sarah seemed to have vanished without a trace. The local community rallied together, organizing search parties and handing out flyers. Volunteers walked the streets, their eyes scanning every corner, every alleyway, every hidden spot. They posted Sarah's picture on every lamppost, every storefront, every available surface. Sarah's school friends made posters with colorful drawings and heartfelt messages, begging for her safe return. They missed her at recess, during art class, and at lunchtime. Her empty desk served as a constant reminder of her absence. Even the toughest kids in school were affected by Sarah's disappearance. The police brought in special dogs trained to sniff out missing persons. The dogs followed Sarah's scent from her house, but the trail went cold near the park. It was as if she had simply disappeared into thin air. The detectives interviewed everyone who knew Sarah, from her closest friends to her distant relatives. They asked about her hobbies, her dreams, her fears. They tried to piece together a picture of her life, hoping to find something that would lead them to her. The search expanded beyond the town limits. Police officers from neighboring counties joined the effort, bringing in more resources and expertise. They searched abandoned buildings, empty fields, and remote areas, leaving no stone unturned. But still, there was no sign of Sarah. The longer she was missing, the more worried everyone became. The hope that she would be found safe and sound began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The police promised Sarah's parents that they would not give up, that they would continue to search until they found her, no matter how long it took. But the weeks dragged on, and the mystery of Sarah's disappearance deepened. The weeks turned into a month. The leaves on the trees began to change color, a stark reminder that time was passing, and Sarah was still gone. The police felt the pressure mounting. The initial flurry of activity had slowed, replaced by a grim determination to keep searching, even when hope seemed lost. They re-interviewed witnesses, revisited old leads, and pored over the evidence again and again, searching for something they might have missed. The detectives would sit in the police station late at night, the only light coming from their desk lamps, their faces tired and drawn. They stared at maps of the town, trying to imagine where Sarah could be. They talked about the case endlessly, trying to come up with new ideas, new strategies, anything that might help them find her. But every path they took seemed to lead to a dead end. The lack of progress weighed heavily on them. They knew that every day that passed made it less likely that they would find Sarah alive. The weight of that responsibility was almost unbearable. Some of the officers started to lose heart. They had worked so hard, followed every lead, and yet they were no closer to finding Sarah than they had been on the first day. They felt like they were running in circles, getting nowhere. Even the most experienced detectives felt a knot of frustration tightening in their stomachs. They had solved countless cases over the years, but this one was different. This one felt personal. They knew Sarah's family, they had seen the pain in their eyes, and they desperately wanted to bring her home. The town, once filled with hope and determination, now felt heavy with sadness and despair. People stopped talking about Sarah's disappearance as much, as if they were afraid of jinxing any potential good news. But in their hearts, they never gave up hope. They continued to wear their "Find Sarah" ribbons, a silent promise that they would never forget her. The police knew they had to keep going, for Sarah, for her family, and for the town that was desperately waiting for her return. They just needed a break, a new piece of information, anything to crack the case open. They were stuck, and they knew it. Just when the case seemed destined to become a cold one, a fresh pair of eyes arrived on the scene. Officer Miller was known around the precinct for his uncanny ability to spot the smallest detail, the one thing everyone else missed. He had a reputation for solving cases that had stumped other detectives for months, sometimes years. He wasn't flashy or loud, he was quiet, observant, and incredibly patient. Officer Miller had been working on another case out of town, but when he heard about Sarah's disappearance, he immediately requested to be transferred. He knew how important it was to find her quickly, and he believed he could bring a new perspective to the investigation. The other officers welcomed him with a mix of hope and skepticism. They were glad to have his help, but they were also wary. They had already tried everything, and they weren't sure what Officer Miller could do that they hadn't already done. But they were willing to give him a chance. Officer Miller started by reviewing the entire case file, reading every report, examining every piece of evidence. He spent hours poring over the details, looking for inconsistencies or overlooked clues. He interviewed the other detectives, asking them about their theories, their hunches, their frustrations. He wanted to understand everything they had done, so he could build on their work. He then began to retrace the steps of the initial investigation, visiting the places where Sarah had last been seen, talking to the people who had last seen her. He walked the streets around her house, paying attention to every detail, every sound, every smell. He wanted to see the world through Sarah's eyes, to understand what she might have seen or heard on the day she disappeared. Officer Miller knew that the key to solving the case lay in finding something that everyone else had overlooked. He just had to figure out what that something was. He had a feeling, a gut instinct, that the answer was hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. He just needed the time and the patience to find it. He was like a bloodhound on a scent, determined to follow it to the end, no matter where it led. He was Sarah's best hope. Officer Miller, after meticulously studying the case files and talking to the other detectives, decided to revisit Sarah's house. He wasn't looking for anything specific, he just wanted to get a feel for the place where Sarah had lived, to see if anything sparked his intuition. He believed that sometimes, the most important clues were the ones that were right in front of your face, hidden in plain sight. He walked slowly around the yard, his eyes scanning every inch of the property. He looked at the flower beds, the swing set, the garden shed, the fence that surrounded the yard. He imagined Sarah playing there, laughing, and enjoying her childhood. He tried to put himself in her shoes, to see the world as she would have seen it. He went inside the house and walked through each room, paying attention to the details. He looked at the pictures on the walls, the books on the shelves, the toys scattered on the floor. He wanted to learn everything he could about Sarah, to understand her personality, her interests, her habits. He spent a long time in Sarah's bedroom, looking at her drawings, her stuffed animals, her collection of seashells. He could almost feel her presence in the room, her energy, her spirit. He sat on her bed and closed his eyes, trying to imagine what it must have been like for her to disappear, to be taken away from her home, her family, her friends. As he walked back outside, Officer Miller decided to take one last look around the garden. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. He noticed something that he hadn't seen before, something that seemed out of place. It was a brick in the garden path, near the back fence. It looked slightly different from the other bricks, as if it had been recently moved. An idea flickered in his mind. It was just a hunch, but he knew he had to investigate. He approached the brick, his heart beating a little faster. He knelt down and examined it closely. Yes, it definitely looked like it had been disturbed. The soil around it was loose, and the brick itself was slightly askew. This small detail, almost invisible, felt significant. Officer Miller knew he had to check what was beneath that brick. Carefully, Officer Miller used his gloved hands to lift the brick. It came away easily, revealing a small, shallow hole in the ground. His heart pounded in his chest. He reached into the hole, his fingers brushing against something hard. He pulled it out. It was Sarah's cell phone. The screen was cracked, but he recognized the colorful case she always used. He reached back into the hole, and this time he found a keychain. It was the one with the little silver heart that Sarah always kept on her backpack. He knew it was hers instantly. A wave of relief washed over him, mixed with a sense of urgency. He had found something significant, but it also meant that Sarah had been here, or at least her belongings had. He carefully placed the phone and keychain in evidence bags, being careful not to disturb anything. He knew that these items could be crucial to solving the case. He called the other detectives, his voice urgent. "I need you to get down here right away," he said. "I found something." While he waited for the other officers to arrive, Officer Miller carefully examined the hole again. He noticed something else, a faint smudge on the underside of the brick. He carefully brushed away some of the dirt and saw a clear fingerprint. He knew that this could be the break they had been waiting for. When the other detectives arrived, they were amazed by what Officer Miller had found. They had searched the property before, but they had missed this hidden clue. They immediately began to secure the area and collect evidence. The fingerprint was sent to the lab for analysis, and the phone and keychain were carefully examined for any other clues. Officer Miller felt a surge of hope. He knew that they were finally on the right track. The discovery of the phone, the keychain, and the fingerprint was a major breakthrough in the case. He just hoped that it wasn't too late to save Sarah. He knew they had to act fast. The clock was ticking. The fingerprint analysis came back quickly. The detective in charge of the lab knew how important this case was and expedited the process. The results were shocking. The fingerprint didn't belong to anyone in Sarah's family, nor did it match any known criminals in the system. It belonged to Mr. Peterson, their next-door neighbor. Mr. Peterson was a quiet, unassuming man who lived alone. He kept to himself and was rarely seen outside his house. He always nodded politely when he saw Sarah's family, but he never engaged in conversation. No one would have suspected him of anything. Officer Miller felt a chill run down his spine. He remembered seeing Mr. Peterson when he first visited Sarah's house. He had been tending his garden, and Officer Miller had simply nodded in acknowledgement. Now, that casual encounter felt sinister. The police immediately obtained a warrant to search Mr. Peterson's house. They approached the house cautiously, not knowing what they would find. They knocked on the door, and Mr. Peterson answered, his face pale and drawn. He seemed nervous and fidgety. The police informed him that they had a warrant to search his house, and he reluctantly let them in. As the officers began their search, Mr. Peterson stood silently, watching them with a mixture of fear and anger. The search of Mr. Peterson's house revealed nothing at first. The house was neat and tidy, and there were no obvious signs of foul play. But Officer Miller, remembering his gut instinct, decided to focus on the basement. The basement was dark and damp, filled with old furniture and boxes. As he searched the room, Officer Miller noticed a small door hidden behind a stack of boxes. He pulled the boxes away and opened the door. Behind the door was a hidden room, a secret space that no one would have known existed. And inside that room, they found Sarah. She was scared and weak, but alive. Mr. Peterson was immediately arrested and taken into custody. The case, which had seemed hopeless just days before, was finally solved, all thanks to a moved brick and Officer Miller's keen eye. Back at the police station, Mr. Peterson sat in the interrogation room, his hands trembling. He denied everything. He claimed he didn't know Sarah, that he had never been in her garden, and that he had no idea how his fingerprint could have ended up on that brick. Officer Miller knew he was lying. He could see it in his eyes, in the way he fidgeted in his chair, in the way he avoided eye contact. He decided to try a different approach. He showed Mr. Peterson a picture of Sarah, her smiling face looking back at him. "Mr. Peterson," he said, his voice calm but firm, "this is Sarah. She's a sweet, innocent little girl who is loved by her family and her community. She doesn't deserve what happened to her." Mr. Peterson remained silent, his face impassive. Officer Miller continued, "We found her phone and her keychain hidden under a brick in her garden. Your fingerprint was on that brick. We know you were there, Mr. Peterson. We know you know what happened to Sarah." Still, Mr. Peterson refused to talk. Officer Miller decided to bring in Sarah's parents. They sat across from Mr. Peterson, their faces filled with pain and anger. Sarah's mom spoke first, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mr. Peterson," she said, "please, just tell us where our daughter is. We just want her back. We're not going to hurt you. We just want to know that she's safe." Sarah's dad added, his voice choked with tears, "Please, Mr. Peterson, have some compassion. Think about your own family. How would you feel if this happened to your child?" Finally, Mr. Peterson's resolve began to crack. He looked at Sarah's parents, and he saw the pain in their eyes. He saw the desperation in their faces. He couldn't bear it any longer. He began to sob uncontrollably, his body shaking with emotion. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he stammered. "It was an accident. I just wanted to talk to her." He then confessed to everything, revealing how he had lured Sarah into his house and hidden her in the secret room in his basement. He explained that he had moved the brick to hide her belongings, hoping to throw off the police. Officer Miller listened intently, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that they had finally gotten the truth. He immediately called the other officers and directed them to the hidden room in Mr. Peterson's basement. They raced to the house, their sirens wailing, determined to rescue Sarah and bring her home safely. The officers arrived at Mr. Peterson's house, their sirens cutting through the quiet of the neighborhood. They burst into the house and raced down to the basement, their guns drawn. They found the hidden door and cautiously opened it, their hearts pounding in their chests. There, in the small, dimly lit room, was Sarah. She was huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with fear. She was thin and pale, but she was alive. The officers rushed to her side, their voices filled with relief. "Sarah, you're safe now," one of the officers said, gently taking her hand. "We're here to take you home." Sarah looked at the officers, her eyes filled with confusion. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew that she was finally safe. The officers carefully lifted her up and carried her out of the room, their hearts filled with joy. As they carried her out of the house, Sarah saw her parents standing outside, their faces etched with worry. When they saw Sarah, their faces lit up with relief, and they rushed towards her, their arms outstretched. "Sarah! My baby!" Sarah's mom cried, tears streaming down her face. She wrapped her arms around Sarah, holding her tight. Sarah's dad joined in the hug, his body shaking with emotion. They were finally reunited with their daughter, and they couldn't have been happier. Sarah was taken to the hospital to be examined, and Mr. Peterson was taken to jail. The town rejoiced at the news of Sarah's rescue. People cheered in the streets, hugged their neighbors, and thanked God for her safe return. The nightmare was finally over. Officer Miller watched as Sarah was reunited with her family, a feeling of satisfaction washing over him. He had done his job, and he had brought a little girl home. He knew that this was a day he would never forget. He went home that night, feeling tired but fulfilled. He knew that he had made a difference in the world. He had saved a life. And that was the best feeling of all. The town went to sleep that night with a collective sigh of relief, knowing that Sarah was safe and sound. The power of observation and a small detail had brought a community together. With Mr. Peterson in custody, the police needed to gather more evidence to ensure a strong case against him. They meticulously documented the hidden room, taking photographs and collecting any potential forensic evidence. They dusted for fingerprints, collected hair samples, and carefully examined every inch of the space. Sarah, still shaken from her ordeal, was interviewed by a child psychologist. The psychologist gently questioned her about her experience, trying to understand what had happened to her and how it had affected her. Sarah was understandably traumatized, but she was also incredibly resilient. She recounted the events of the day she disappeared, explaining how Mr. Peterson had lured her into his house with the promise of showing her some kittens. She described the hidden room, the darkness, and the fear she had felt. She also spoke about Mr. Peterson, his strange behavior, and the things he had said to her. Her testimony was crucial to building a solid case against him. The police also interviewed Mr. Peterson's neighbors, trying to learn more about his background and his personality. They discovered that he had always been a loner, that he had never had any close friends or family. They also learned that he had a history of mental illness and had been treated for depression in the past. As the investigation progressed, the police uncovered more and more evidence linking Mr. Peterson to Sarah's disappearance. They found traces of Sarah's hair and clothing in his house, and they discovered a notebook in which he had written about his obsession with her. The evidence was overwhelming, and it was clear that Mr. Peterson was guilty of kidnapping and imprisoning Sarah. The district attorney prepared to prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. The town, still reeling from the shock of Sarah's disappearance and rescue, demanded justice. They wanted to see Mr. Peterson punished for what he had done. Sarah, with the support of her family, her friends, and her community, began the long and difficult process of healing. She knew that she would never forget what had happened to her, but she was determined to move on with her life and to live it to the fullest. She was a survivor, and she was an inspiration to everyone who knew her. The case of the moved brick and the hidden room became a reminder of the importance of vigilance and the power of hope. The trial of Mr. Peterson was a somber affair. The courtroom was packed with members of the community, all eager to see justice served. Sarah and her family sat in the front row, their faces a mixture of sadness and determination. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against Mr. Peterson, including the fingerprint on the brick, Sarah's testimony, and the items found in his house. They painted a picture of Mr. Peterson as a disturbed and dangerous man who had preyed on an innocent child. The defense argued that Mr. Peterson was mentally ill and that he had not intended to harm Sarah. They claimed that he had simply wanted to befriend her and that he had panicked when she had become frightened. The jury listened intently to the evidence and the arguments, their faces thoughtful and serious. After several days of deliberation, they reached a verdict. They found Mr. Peterson guilty on all counts, including kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and child endangerment. The judge sentenced Mr. Peterson to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in applause as the verdict was announced. Justice had finally been served. Sarah and her family were relieved by the outcome of the trial. They knew that nothing could ever erase the pain and suffering that they had endured, but they were grateful that Mr. Peterson would never be able to hurt another child again. In the years that followed, Sarah became an advocate for child safety. She spoke to schools and community groups about her experience, urging children to be careful and to trust their instincts. She also worked to raise awareness about the dangers of predators and the importance of reporting suspicious behavior. Officer Miller was hailed as a hero for his role in solving the case. He received numerous awards and accolades, but he always remained humble and down-to-earth. He knew that he had simply been doing his job and that he had been lucky to find the clue that had led to Sarah's rescue. The case of the moved brick became a symbol of hope and resilience for the town. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always light to be found. And that even the smallest detail can make a big difference. The town never forgot Sarah, or the officer who brought her home. The cracked case was finally closed. Even years later, Officer Miller would sometimes visit Sarah's family. He would bring them flowers and sit with them on the porch, talking about old times. He became like an uncle to Sarah, a trusted friend and confidant. Sarah never fully recovered from her ordeal, but she learned to live with it. She went on to graduate from high school, attend college, and start a successful career. She got married and had children of her own. She taught her children about the importance of being careful and trusting their instincts, just as she had learned to do. The moved brick remained in Sarah's garden, a constant reminder of the day that changed her life forever. She would often sit by the brick, reflecting on the past and looking forward to the future. She knew that she was lucky to be alive, and she was determined to make the most of every day. Officer Miller eventually retired from the police force, but he never stopped thinking about Sarah. He followed her life closely, always cheering her on from the sidelines. He was proud of the woman she had become, and he was grateful to have played a part in her story. The town never forgot the case of the moved brick. It became a local legend, a story that was passed down from generation to generation. It was a story about the importance of vigilance, the power of hope, and the difference that one person can make. And so, the story of Sarah and Officer Miller lived on, a testament to the human spirit and the enduring power of good over evil. It was a story that reminded everyone that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope to be found. And that even the smallest detail can change the course of history. The moved brick, once a symbol of fear and danger, became a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that even the most difficult challenges can be overcome. The case was closed, but the lessons learned would last a lifetime. The end. Even though the trial was over, and Mr. Peterson was behind bars, Sarah's parents still felt a lingering unease. They couldn't shake the feeling that they had missed something, that there was something more they needed to understand about what had happened to their daughter. They decided to visit Mr. Peterson in prison. They wanted to look him in the eye and ask him why he had done what he had done. They wanted to understand his motivations, his thoughts, his feelings. The prison visit was a difficult and emotional experience. Mr. Peterson was a changed man. He was gaunt and pale, and he seemed to be filled with remorse. He told Sarah's parents that he was sorry for what he had done, that he knew he had ruined their lives. He explained that he had been lonely and isolated for many years, that he had longed for connection and companionship. He said that he had seen Sarah as a symbol of innocence and joy, and that he had wanted to protect her, to keep her safe. He admitted that his actions had been wrong, that he had made a terrible mistake. He said that he was willing to accept whatever punishment he deserved. Sarah's parents listened to Mr. Peterson's explanation, their faces a mixture of anger, sadness, and confusion. They couldn't forgive him for what he had done, but they could understand, to some extent, why he had done it. As they left the prison, Sarah's parents felt a sense of closure. They knew that they would never fully understand Mr. Peterson's actions, but they had heard his explanation, and they had seen the remorse in his eyes. They were finally ready to move on with their lives. Sarah, with the love and support of her family and her community, continued to heal and to thrive. She became a strong and confident woman, a beacon of hope for others who had experienced trauma. She never forgot what had happened to her, but she refused to let it define her. She chose to focus on the present and to look forward to the future. And so, the story of Sarah and the moved brick came to an end, a story of darkness and light, of fear and hope, of loss and resilience. A story that would be remembered for generations to come. The cracked case, though leaving scars, ultimately led to healing and a better understanding of the complexities of the human condition. But the story doesn't truly end there. Years after the events, a new family moved into Mr. Peterson's old house. They knew the history of the house, of course, and some were hesitant to live there. But the house was beautiful and affordable, and they decided to give it a chance. One day, the family's young daughter, Lily, was playing in the backyard. She was digging in the garden, pretending to be an archaeologist. As she dug, she unearthed something strange. It was a small, wooden box. Lily brought the box to her parents, who carefully opened it. Inside, they found a collection of small, colorful stones, each one carefully wrapped in a piece of paper. On each piece of paper was written a single word: hope, love, courage, strength, peace, and joy. The family was touched by the discovery. They realized that Mr. Peterson, despite his terrible actions, had also possessed a deep sense of humanity. He had hidden these stones in the garden as a reminder of the good things in life, the things that are worth fighting for. The family decided to keep the stones and to display them prominently in their house. They wanted to honor Sarah's memory and to remind themselves that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope to be found. And so, the story of the moved brick continued to evolve, adding new layers of meaning and complexity. It became a story about forgiveness, about redemption, and about the enduring power of the human spirit. A reminder that even those who have committed terrible acts are still capable of experiencing love, hope, and remorse. The cracked case, though born from tragedy, ultimately gave way to a message of understanding and the possibility of finding good even in the most unlikely of places. The story reminds us that judging people is difficult and that everyone has a story. The moral of the story isn't just about a crime solved, it's about paying attention. It's about how even the smallest clue, the thing everyone else overlooks, can be the key. It's about how important it is to trust your gut, like Officer Miller did when he saw that brick. It's also about community. The town came together to search for Sarah, showing the power of people helping each other. They didn't give up hope, even when things looked bad. They supported Sarah's family and celebrated her return. And finally, it's about resilience. Sarah went through something terrible, but she didn't let it break her. She became stronger and used her experience to help others. She showed that even after something bad happens, you can still find a way to move forward and make a difference. The story of the moved brick is a reminder that good can triumph over evil, that hope can conquer despair, and that even the smallest among us can make a big difference. So, the next time you see something that doesn't quite fit, something that seems a little out of place, remember Sarah and the moved brick. Remember that paying attention can make all the difference. Remember that even when things seem hopeless, there is always reason to hope. And remember that even in the face of darkness, the human spirit can endure and triumph. The end. The cracked case is closed for good. But the lessons live on, a whispered reminder carried on the wind, echoing through the generations. Pay attention. Hope. Persevere. Help. These are the keys. These were the keys. And these, perhaps, will always be the keys. Sarah clung tightly to her mom and dad as they walked out of the hospital, the flashing lights of the police cars reflecting in their tear-filled eyes. The cool night air felt strange on her skin after being trapped in the darkness for so long. She looked up at the sky, dotted with twinkling stars, a sight she had feared she might never see again. Timmy, her little brother, ran to her, his teddy bear clutched in his hand. He wrapped his small arms around her legs, burying his face in her jeans. "Sarah, you're back. You're really back," he cried, his voice muffled. Sarah knelt down and hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of his small body against hers. "I'm back, Timmy," she whispered. "I'm home." As they drove home, Sarah looked out the window at the familiar streets, the houses decorated with "Welcome Home Sarah" signs, the neighbors waving and smiling. The whole town seemed to be celebrating her return. When they arrived at their house, a crowd of people was waiting for them. Friends, family, neighbors, even people they didn't know, all there to welcome Sarah home. They cheered and clapped as Sarah stepped out of the car, their faces filled with joy and relief. Mrs. Gable, her kind eyes filled with tears, pushed her way through the crowd and hugged Sarah tightly. "Welcome home, sweetie," she said. "We're so glad you're safe." The whole family walked into the house together, surrounded by loved ones. The house was filled with balloons, flowers, and homemade cards. It was a celebration of hope, a celebration of life, a celebration of Sarah's return. Later that night, after everyone had left, Sarah sat on her bed, looking around her room. Everything was just as she had left it, her drawings on the walls, her stuffed animals on the shelves, her collection of seashells on the windowsill. She picked up Snowball, her fluffy white cat, and held him close. He purred contentedly, rubbing his head against her cheek. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling grateful to be home, grateful to be safe, and grateful to be alive. The cracked case was now a symbol of strength. And so ended the long day, but not the long-lived story.